Hi, I'm Claire Ross-Brown, and I am so happy to welcome you to Heroes in Action, which is a new series where we bring you the stories of extraordinary individuals and organizations that are committed to changing the world. And for our first episode, I'm so honored to have Lisa Henry. Lisa is Secretary General of the International Rehabilitation Council for Torture Victims. They're based in Copenhagen, and Lisa leads a global effort to enable the physical and psychological healing journey of survivors of torture. Lisa's work, it embodies the spirit of heroism that this series is all about, and my deepest hope is that this interview stirs something within you, a desire to want to make a difference. Whether it's a small gesture or a big commitment, your help can truly change lives. And on that note, it is my great pleasure to introduce you all to Lisa. Lisa, it is such a pleasure to have you here today.
It's an honor to be here, and thanks for the invite, Claire.
Oh, but it was a natural, because 4 years ago when we met one another, I didn't know what capacity, how it was going to be, but I knew that I wanted personally to do something to help what you do, because it is such an amazing gift that you give to others. And you work with people that are victims of torture, which is such a heavy subject matter. And I can only imagine that when you tell people what you work with, what are the responses that you get?
Well, sometimes it's a bit of a showstopper. I think people have a hard time understanding what it is. And there are others that ask me, does torture still happen? We thought that was a thing of the past. And then I have an opportunity to unfold it a little bit more, unpack what we do, and explain that torture is still going on today.
Yeah. And I think it's difficult because the word in itself is just simply so heavy. It's not that people don't want to know more. It's just where do you start, and what is the comprehension? Because I know I had a lot of different things going through my head, and that's what I want to explore today. Because one thing is for sure, I know there are so many people that are going to be watching this that afterwards they will be driven to want to do something in themselves to help. So tell us, how did you get involved with the IRCT to start with?
Well, I think I was probably one of those people who want to help, right? I grew up in a family where my mom and dad were active in their volunteerism and giving back. They taught my brothers and I that that's what we should do in life. I studied at the University of Michigan, and then I went on to give myself and time to the United States Peace Corps. So I was in Mud Hut, Africa, and really trying it, on my own skin, to live in an African village in both the times when there was a famine and when we had a locust infestation, and seeing the local community coping. And came out of that with an idea. I really wanted to give back to the humanitarian community, to the global humanitarian community. Worked in humanitarian response for 25 years of my career here in Denmark, and ended now, luckily, in the International Rehabilitation Council for Torture Victims.
Another thing, Lisa, we are sitting here in Copenhagen, and a lot of Danes that are watching this, as well as internationally, will be very, very surprised to know that actually Denmark was the first country in the world to really put focus on rehabilitating victims of torture. Can you tell us a little bit more about exactly when that started in the early 70s?
Yeah. Well, it was in the 70s when there were refugees arriving here from Greece and from Chile, and Amnesty International called medical doctors to identify what these people had suffered. And Inger Ganefni, a neurologist at Rigshospitalet, the main hospital here, together with 3 others, diagnosed that these people had suffered from torture, psychological torture, physical torture, and they started the first torture rehabilitation program. From that beginning, we now have 167 torture rehabilitation centers around the world. Wow. So it's the legacy of what Denmark started that I think we can represent today in talking about the over 71,000 torture survivors that all these torture rehabilitation centers now are treating.
Yeah. And if we take the word torture, which again is so heavy, what is torture exactly? Because I know it's not just physical, it's emotional. What defines torture, and what would you say will impact people listening to this so that they really have an understanding of what that's about?
So there's an official definition of torture. The Convention Against Torture has it. It's about torture and ill treatment of individuals. It's about a power imbalance. It's about destroying people's ability to be in control. It's the psychological damage that happens if you're put into detention, if you're put in a dark room for hours, if you're left hanging in a cell, if you are suffering sexual torture, if you are electrocuted, if you are abused verbally, if you're shocked. These are all different ways in which torture happens these days.
Yeah. And I think that and I know that we talked a little bit, actually before the interview, about how deep does one talk about on a program like this, where we want people to listen, we want them to actually understand and within themselves want to help. And how much do they need to know, and I think that's different. We talked about that for a lot of people. And of course, now we're talking about it on a way, if I was to put it in my own words, that's digestible for people. But I really hope that they will understand the true depth and darkness of really the torture that exists in the world today. Because I know that when I myself, just looking on your website, just listening to some of the video testimonials of some of these extremely courageous people, I found it hard. I started it. I stopped after, I think, almost 40 seconds of watching one of them. And, this was a mother. We'll talk about her later, Sharetta. And, her children seeing her raped. And as a mother, that is just incomprehensible. And how she courageously has come forward as a true voice. Can you tell us a little bit more about her, bring her story out to the others?
Well, I can say that most acts of torture are incredibly gruesome. It is some of the darkest side of humanity that shows up in the actions people take. Sharetta Suleimani, who is a mother of 2 and who lived in Kosovo, was sexually tortured by soldiers that came into her home. They did this in front of her children. They used rape as a tool of control, a tool of manipulation. It destabilized her. It depressed her afterwards, obviously. There was a lot of stigmatization in the community. She was unclean. It took a long time for her to go onto a journey of rehabilitation after that. But she did, and this is what healing is all about. She found a safe haven. She found the Kosovo Rehabilitation Center for torture survivors in Kosovo. She was met by professional caregivers, psychologists, sociologists, who know how to handle this kind of situation. Was able to go to group therapy, was able to find that there were many other women, unfortunately in Kosovo, who had suffered the same fate, and I would say men and women, but they were able to have group therapy to find a safe space in which they could work through the trauma of what had happened to them. And today, Sharetta is one of the people who is speaking all around the world about what happened to her.
Yeah.
Her kids know what happened to her. They accept that this is part of her, but it's not all of her.
Yes.
And Sharetta carries her voice all around the world, most recently speaking with Hillary Clinton in a think tank that she had about her story. And the implications of what she's been able to do, and then going through the justice system in Kosovo, is that the Kosovo government has had a real breakthrough legislation, and they are now awarding people who have suffered sexual torture a pension, just like you would soldiers or people who serve in the military. So they are recognizing this crime, and they're recognizing there's a need for reparation.
Yes. And I think
it's not the only way to solve the problem, obviously, but this is often what happens, that people who have, suffered torture, they fall out of society and they're not able to earn a living. And so this thing about having a pension is an incredibly important part of that story.
When she tells her story, as you said, it's absolutely awful what's happened to her. And she wants to be a voice because she wants to be able to help others who've been through this. But it does not define her. And I think that was really powerful for me to hear that. This awful thing has happened to me, but it will not define the rest of my life. Because I think that is such a powerful statement in itself that could help so many. And I know it was a staggering amount. I think I read something like 200,000 in Kosovo that had some sort of torture. And at that point, only 2 had come forward to actually speak about it, because also for some of the men, it was just, as you said, so embarrassing, and something that, how does one even begin to talk about that? And when I saw one of the video footages of Sharetta, where she had some of the women at her home, and they were just, having tea and cookies, and there was just a peacefulness about it, and some sort of, you could really, really feel that this was a room full of women that were coming together, that supported one another. And going back to the other thing that you actually said that I wanted to pick up on, that takes me to the question about the forensic part of what you do. So tell me exactly why that is so crucial.
Sure. So when you're a torture survivor and you arrive at a center where you feel safe enough, comfortable enough, and you've been met and potentially have had a rehabilitation process, part of that process would be a medical assessment of what's happened to you. And this is done according to Istanbul Protocol. So this is an internationally accepted protocol in which a medical doctor has to examine the client and fill out a form in order to determine what has happened. And there are steps to do this, and it's quite rigorous. It also has to be done in a way that's humane and we call it trauma-informed. Right. So you have to be really sensitive as a medical practitioner in making the analysis and making this assessment. Once you have that documentation and you've talked to the person and corroborated, do these things make sense? What I'm hearing this person say, does it correspond to what I'm seeing on their body in the documentation, in maybe the photos that have been presented to me? The forensic experts will analyze then, does this stand up to the test of, is this torture?
Yeah.
And in many cases around the world, they will look at a variety of these assessments to see if there's a trend. Is there a pattern? Can we see that this is happening to a variety of different men and women, maybe across an entire country, so that we can say this is a systematic message apparently given by some person in a place of power, in the police, in the military, in a militia group, because the type of torture that has been performed here is something we're seeing in a variety of cases.
Yeah.
So the forensic experts are able to say, with a bit of distance and a technical analysis, just looking at this, not knowing the person as such, but just looking at the evidence and having corroborated and heard the story, it makes sense. And we're able to make an assessment and a conclusion.
Yes.
And say, we feel that this represents a case of systematic torture. That person can then go with their case if they want to pursue justice.
Yes.
So what does that mean? That's the long haul. So you have to have a lawyer that's going to accompany you. There has to be a courthouse that will take the case. It's not easy. It's a long process sometimes. Justice takes a long time.
Yeah.
So there are many people who choose not to go that route. They rather say, it's important for me to become, like Sharetta, sane again.
Yes.
Feel healthy again.
Yeah.
Be able to be a good mom again. Be able to, function in my society. But others will choose the route and use the forensic experts that we have, and there are 45 of them that IRCT has as volunteers on our staff. We coordinate them, and we call upon them when the case comes to our attention. And we look at their language skills, their cultural skills, their experience in different countries around the world. And then we assign different forensic experts to the different cases.
Yeah. And just, again, some of the stories I read were really harrowing. And also with the forensic team, they could spot patterns. So they could see if it was torture to the eyes, they could see a systematic pattern of this. And some of the pictures I saw, I couldn't help but think of you. You're a mum of 4. And I know your children are older now, but over the years, because you've been working with humanitarian rights for many, many years, not just the IRCT, I wanted to ask you, how do you switch off from what you're seeing on a daily basis and survivors that you're talking to when you come home?
Yeah. Well, I would say, Claire, I don't think I switch off. I think it's a question of understanding what's going on and how to approach it, and understanding who you're talking to. In the course of the day, you're talking with your staff, you're working with your staff. And I will often be online, these days with leaders of these member centers around the world, talking about management issues, talking them through how they're going to seek new funding, talking them through how they're working with some of their staff members who have suffered vicarious trauma and need help. So I think there's an attitude from my side of, we have such a pressing agenda, and the work we have to do has to move forward. And we're just a small piece in this huge puzzle. And the people on the front lines are really the ones who are, in it up to their necks, day in and day out. So I feel the piece of the puzzle that we're part of putting into place is not a relatively easy one, but I'm able to say, this is the piece that we need to do. So when I go home from the office and I arrive at the house, I will often explain to my family, and they will ask, what have you been working on today? What country has been in focus? Or they read something in the paper. Politiken is the newspaper we read at home. What's going on in Gaza these days? Or what's going on in Belarus? We met some of these people. Mom, when you invited them home for dinner one night, is it that human rights lawyer who's actually doing this case? So I would say it's not for me about shutting off. It's about managing and keeping my focus and inner compass on the fact that we are moving things forward. We're helping people that desperately need it. And it makes good sense to do this. So I feel it's one of the many types of work in the humanitarian community that have to get done and should be done. And therefore, I'm not saying it's easy. I'm just saying I think there are ways that you can choose to navigate. And that inner compass has helped me to keep these two pieces, I wouldn't say divided, because I definitely combine what I do during the day with what I do with my family. And maybe that is a way that helps me to navigate and helps my family to understand what I do and support me in doing it.
On the one hand, and I think there's many people also, the same as myself, thinking, why does torture still exist? Why? And I know that's a hard question, and I'm not throwing it at you, but sometimes I do think to myself, has it gotten worse over the years, or have we gotten better?
I mean, I would say we have gotten better. I mean, there are many countries now that have legislation in place. We've seen recently some successes. I mean, there was a court case just, I think, last month in Nigeria, where the 3 women who actually took their case to court won their case. They had been at a protest, and they had suffered because the protest was so violent in the way the police were reacting. It was a protest against police violence, and then the same exact thing happens during this protest. And they suffered such a shock in seeing what was going on, and brought that case to court. And we won that case. So there's some precedent set when there's violence and torture happening during protests that you can actually take it to court and win the case. And that, I think, inspires others to do the same. And those who are bringing the cases to court and have been through this rehabilitation journey are proving that it is possible.
Yeah.
There is respect in many places around the world for rule of law.
Yeah.
There is respect for the Convention Against Torture. I can seek justice and achieve it, and that will be part of my rehabilitation journey. That being said, there's still brutal reports of what's going on these days, and I don't need to mention the places, but I will. What's going on in Ukraine, what's going on in Russia, what's going on in Colombia with eye injuries, what's going on in Chile, what's going on in Gaza and Israel. I mean, in that way, I would say it seems that there are some that continue to act with impunity and with disregard for international humanitarian law.
Yeah.
And I think some of the techniques that are being used are getting more nuanced, more sophisticated, able. I mean, taking people who definitely have a problem with being stripped naked and using that as a technique. So you're stripping males naked and having them kneel for hours in open spaces, which is incredibly psychologically damaging on a variety of levels. And this is a tool that we're seeing happening more and more often. We're also seeing sexual torture. And this is an incredibly degrading situation to be in, because it also goes to family values, it goes to religious values, it goes to community values. So there are some techniques and tools of torture that really discourage me sometimes.
So Lisa, the word rehabilitation, now it's the process of making or becoming healthy again. And I'm thinking there must be so many different levels of what's needed. And also the trust is completely broken within them. How does one help them to trust again before even getting to the part of how do you start having a normal everyday life? How does that journey look like for someone?
Well, for the first, it's a long one. I think we just have to be honest about that. I think for most survivors, the best way to meet them and to be part of the rehabilitation journey is to listen to them, to see them, to create a safe space into which they can come, to ask how they're feeling, what they need, what their own aspirations are. most often people want to be in control of something, of anything, right? So for many torture survivors, the rehabilitation journey can start really slow. It's first establishing that safe space. We have to understand what they've come from is something completely different, right? So it's also being aware of how you look, how you're meeting people.
Right.
So anyone who's meeting a survivor, from the receptionist, from the finance officer who happens to walk by, to, of course, the psychologist or psychiatrist or doctor or lawyer who's meeting them, have to have this attitude. They have to understand what a trauma-informed approach is. Because if you come in and you just start firing questions at somebody, they're going to freeze. And they may not be able to recall. Totally honest, sometimes people have memory loss. It's a reflex that people have. Your memory locks down to protect you from, and later on that memory can come alive again. So the first thing is patience, listening, and to establish this safe environment and trustful environment. At that point, then survivors can be potentially put on a journey of, you're going to need physical therapy. You might need medical attention. If it's been sexual torture, you might need reconstructive surgery of some parts of your body. You might need some medicine. But you may also need some group work, group therapy. You may need physical therapy, talked about, and that can also extend to maybe some yoga sessions, there are people who do music groups, they do art therapy. Some groups have hiking tours. In Colombia, they were working with graffiti, right? It's an outlet, creative outlet. People often have this inside themselves. Maybe it's not with words they want to express their situation. Maybe they can use it in their painting or their music or their movement of their body. So the rehabilitation journey is what we call interdisciplinary. There are a lot of different services that can be combined in a rehabilitation journey. But the main point I would say is the survivor should be in control and should be asked, is this making sense to you? Do you understand what we're doing together? Do you feel comfortable in this space? So we have to be checking in and let them control and direct and influence this journey. The last thing that's super important we've learned most recently, if there's another survivor who can be part of this group that meets this survivor who's just come to the center, for example, to be part of that, oh, so you've been through this journey. You understand what I've been through. And they are able to, in some way, explain a little bit better maybe than the psychologist, psychiatrist, medical doctor, lawyer, what it's like, how long it's going to take, what your family will be doing. Maybe they will suggest a former survivor, the family could come in and be part of the rehab.
Love the fact that you use the word control, because of course that's what's been taken away from them, as any form of control, which we all are entitled 100% to have over the choices and the things that we do. And when that's taken away, to kind of reinstall, I suppose, going back to the trust in human nature, that's really hard. And I think there's so many wonderful psychologists. I know that I also met one of them, and but it's and that's incredible. But it is just something else to be able, I suppose, to combine that with also meeting fellow victims, if one can say that, and survivors that can really help.
And also thinking about, I would add, daily life, right?
Yeah.
Because I think most people, moms, dads, brothers, sisters, aunts, what have you, if you're going to be in a new situation, maybe you fled from the country you've been persecuted in or tortured in, had a very rough journey, you arrive in a country, your most obvious needs are the things that preoccupy you.
Yeah.
So your kids' safety.
Yes.
Right? Maybe schooling for your kids. And even before that, maybe food for your kids, where they can sleep at night, right?
Yeah.
So I've heard many survivors talk about, yes, I need help.
Yeah.
But if the first offer that's coming is a long psychological, experience of 10 sessions of 1 hour per session, I need to, at the same time, be able to say, I need to pay my rent. Yeah. So I need some help. If I can solve that basic, right, need for myself and my kids, then I can focus more on my own mental health.
Yes.
So I think people, and that's something that we in the professional community of mental health experts have to really be cognizant of.
Yes.
Right? It's not that they're saying no to mental health care, but they have something that weighs heavier on their shoulders.
Absolutely.
And so if you can't address that and speak about it, and maybe the psychologist at the rehabilitation centers can't address that, but maybe they know someone else who can.
Yes.
So connecting them to a service that might be provided elsewhere.
Yeah.
Or to a survivor group that knows how to actually, right, establish connections to this is where job opportunities might come. It can help. But we just have to think about it's a holistic way of looking at rehabilitation.
Yeah.
It's the one thing. And the other thing is, are people healed? Okay, now you're healed. Nothing's never going to ever happen to you again. That's not the way this works.
I was trying to say that because it never goes away, even though you're giving them tools to be able to handle it so that they can have as much as possible a normal life, to be able to get a job. I love the fact that the pension is now awarded in some countries. A part of me also wonders, and I know we touched on it a little bit earlier, but also the people that are working with this, it has a toll on them. Do they have help?
So again, an incredibly important topic, right? Because like any other industry in the world, torture rehabilitation centers suffer burnout, right? And many of the staff can suffer vicarious trauma if you're not cognizant of it and if you're not working as the leadership in these organizations to protect and provide staff welfare training, provide some technical supervision. So often the technique will be like during Ukraine, when many of the member centers were dealing with, right, Ukrainian torture survivors coming in Ukraine, but also in the surrounding countries.
Yeah.
And they were pretty much overwhelmed. They went from treating 30 clients a day to treating 300 clients a day. That's a heavy load. So you need to be able to say, okay, how can we care for these psychologists, psychiatrists, as you say, hearing this story every day? And there are systems. One is to take the people off site.
Yeah.
So to bring them to somewhere else where they can literally disconnect for a while and then go through a therapeutic session themselves, where they have professional supervision by another psychologist who is trained in this kind of treatment of vicarious trauma. And what we need to do as an organization, and we need to be doing it much better, is that making sure that each organization of these 167 partners have a plan and have some funding to be able to do that. But the professional supervision is also an incredibly important part of it. And it is built into the system, but it's not every organization that has the mindset to make sure that this gets done. And this is something that IRCT is working on to do even more of as we move forward. So it's staff welfare and it's treatment of vicarious trauma. We call it care for caregivers. And in our organization, we add plus, care for caregivers plus.
Yeah.
Why the plus? Because they're finance officers on staff, they're communication people. They're also experiencing this. You need to take care of them also.
Yes.
So it's making sure that the staff are equipped with some tools, techniques, relaxation techniques, team techniques they can use, helping each other, peer support mechanisms.
Yeah.
So there's a whole system that we're trying to put in place and enhance.
Your team is small, not because you would love to be bigger, you would love to have more resources, but of course you're reliant on getting external funding.
Yeah.
You must come home at the end of the day sometimes being so frustrated because you know that you could do more for this person or that person.
So true.
But you just simply don't have enough resources.
Yeah. It's the question of the day. I don't think there's anyone in the humanitarian community that wouldn't say the same, or the human rights community. That being said, there's a lot of volunteerism in our sector, and it's phenomenal. I mean, all our forensic experts are, so to speak, volunteers. We'll pay their travel costs to get them there, but they donate their time. The entire governance of our organization, pretty much all of them psychologists. So my board members, they're all donating their time to lead this organization. And at the same time, we have member states of the United Nations, the Danish government, the Swiss government, the European Union, the American government, donating generously, but there's a need for more because we are not addressing all the torture survivors in the world. We're addressing those who have the resources to get to these member centers. There's masses of people who are not reaching these centers who need help. So it's great that we have so much volunteerism, and pro bono work is amazingly helpful, but we need more funding. And I think the United Nations and the Special Rapporteur on Torture is talking about this often, that states really should be living up to their obligations to provide the right to rehabilitation in each country.
Yeah.
And bar that, supporting non-governmental organizations who fill the niche, right?
Yeah.
I've been challenged by some consultants saying, you shouldn't be here. The national health programs around the world should be taking care of torture survivors. Fair enough. I respect that. If they function, and if they had enough money to do it and they prioritized it. but they don't, and they aren't. So therefore, there's a huge gap.
Yeah.
And NGOs, non-governmental organizations like the entire IRCT network and its great membership are filling an incredibly important gap to make sure people are seen and heard and heal and become world leaders again.
Yeah.
These people sometimes are the most incredibly powerful leaders we want to have active in our society, I would say. I mean, most recently, my colleague who talked to me last night, he's a survivor from Chad. He was just in the White House. That's the kind of influencing we can do more of. And that's the kind of person we want in leadership positions. Having been through a healing journey, he has the experience of torture with him. It's not the only thing he has, but those kind of people, these are activists, these are human rights talents, and they have a competency that this world needs. So we need to do more to support them.
I believe that a lot of us would love to help. And my wish for this is simply that we can help, because I believe that even just by this one program, if we could help 10 people with more funding, more financing that helps your job easier to help them, I think that's something that everyone would love to do. Because I know that what you do, it's not about it, you never get any recognition. It's not about that. I know that, Lisa. I want everyone watching this, I want them to feel that they have the power to make a difference and to make a change. What can they do?
Well, it would be amazing if they would support the work of IRCT. I mean, I have to say there are masses of good intentions, and there's a lot of good ideas out there. There are a lot of companies maybe in Denmark who have resources, but also like technical skills that might be helpful. So, I mean, competence and professional skills and more pro bono support we could always use. I would say funding for these member organizations. And I mean, my idea is that when we get funding in the Secretariat, I call it like this, push it out to these member centers. They are on the front lines. They need more resources to do the work they're doing. So, you can feel like, oh, am I putting my money into some machine and they're eating up all the, proceeds in administrative costs and headquarters? I can tell you, we work in 2 little rooms in a back garden in Nørrebro. We keep the leanest team possible. We're keeping our expenses to the lowest level possible in order to, and we're using all the techniques we know, working virtually, using telehealth, right? Not traveling as much, using online facilitation. So we're trying to be really cognizant of our climate and being cost effective. You can also contribute by calling your politician, your local politicians, and registering with them. I am dissatisfied with the amount of funding that Denmark is giving to the torture campaign. Could we give more?
Yeah. And for other countries also, for internationally,
sure.
around the world. Yeah.
I mean, this thing of, the citizen is here. You're an active citizen. Use your active citizenship.
Yes.
You yourself have a platform. And if you would like to connect with a survivor, I mean, we can also provide that opportunity. I think sometimes speaking to these survivors or listening to some of the videos that you'll find on our YouTube channel, it just rocks your world to think that this is something that's going on. So getting close to what we're doing could also be something that you could do for people who are watching this program.
And I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for what you do, because I think it's amazing. Yeah. And I'm so happy that we met each other.
Yeah, and, I think it's like this, I always call it like a meeting of the ways, right?
Yeah.
And people and like-minded people meet. And I think then something happens. It's like a catalyst. So I'm super honored to be here, that you took the time, that you didn't like walk by. Very cool. Thank you very much.
No, thank you too, Lisa. Thank you.
You're welcome.
And for all of you watching, I really, really hope from the bottom of my heart that you will be touched enough by this interview to do something proactive and help Lisa and the IRCT in any way that you can. And if you're a student watching this, it could be 20 krona mobile pay. It doesn't matter. Every tiny little bit makes a huge difference. And you're saving a life. You are saving a life literally somewhere along the line, and that is just worth everything. So thank you so much for joining me today.